Good evening. Welcome to the September 11th meeting of the Aiken City Council. On this, the 16th anniversary of 9/11, of course, it's the anniversary of the terror attacks, and I ask that we pause to remember the events of that tragic day as we honor the victims and, of course, the heroism of the first responders. We remember the 40 passengers of United Airlines Flight 93. Remember the 184 people from the Pentagon and the 2,983 people killed in the horrific acts in New York that day. So if you would, please stand with me. Let's have a moment of silence, followed by a prayer. Let's pray. Father, we thank you for this evening. We're reminded, even as we look outside, of the strength of nature of your hands. We thank you for the safety that you've given our city through this last test that we've been through. We just pray that you would be with this council tonight, Father. Give us wisdom as we tend to the needs of the people, to the issues of the people. We ask your guidance and help in all we do. In your name we ask it. Amen. Amen. I'm going to ask Councilman Dewar if he would lead us in our pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Councilman Dewar. I'd like to recognize it.
Mr. Mayor,
Additions and deletions to the agenda.
are there any from council members, any additions or changes to the agenda, please? Hearing none, I'll move we accept the agenda as posted.
Okay, we have a motion.
Second.
We have a second. All those in favor? And that's unanimous. Thank you. The minutes were distributed prior to the meeting to all the council members for their review. Is there a motion to accept the minutes as presented?
I so move.
Okay, Councilwoman Diggs, Councilman Moki seconds. All those in favor? And that's unanimous. Thank you. Moving down to presentations. Number one under presentations is a request from the Pink Ribbonettes to place pink ribbons in the downtown area for Breast Cancer Awareness Month. I spoke with a representative of the group today. We'll probably present this at an event next month, but they wanted to go on and have this on the agenda, and because of the weather, they're not able to make it tonight. So is there a motion for approval?
I so move.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor? That's unanimous. Thank you. Number two is a request from the Cumbie Center to place purple ribbons in the downtown area in a silhouette display to bring awareness to Domestic Violence Awareness Month in October. Because it runs concurrent with the Breast Cancer Awareness Month, the groups are actually going to get together so that it's in different areas and so that we don't have so many ribbons around the same poles for it. So the coordination is very much appreciated. Is there a motion?
So moved, Mr. Mayor.
I second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor? And that's unanimous. Thank you. Number three is a request from Women Build Committee for Aiken County Habitat for Humanity to hang banners in the downtown for their kitchen tour. Is there a motion?
So moved, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, we have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a second. All those in favor? And I'll just say staff has reviewed. Number four is a presentation of proclamation for Constitution Week to the Henry Middleton chapter and the Trenton chapter of the National Society Daughters of the American Revolution. And I will let council know they wanted to be here tonight. Because of the weather, they were not able to. I'll be presenting this in my office Thursday at 9 a.m. If anyone would like to join me, I'm sure they'd be thrilled to have you there as well. So,
Thank you.
Is there a motion?
So moved, Mr. Mayor.
Second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor? And that's unanimous. Thank you. Moving down to old business. Number 1 is approval of appointments for discussion of appointees to various city boards, commissions, and committees. And I'll recognize our city manager, John Clem.
Mr. Mayor, council has 13 pending appointments to fill vacancies on different city boards, commissions, and committees. 2 appointments are presented for council's consideration and vote at the meeting tonight. Councilwoman Diggs has recommended the appointment of Bill Goodson to the Senior Commission to fill the position of Scott Murphy, who has resigned. Mr. Goodson would represent the Council on Aging. If appointed, Mr. Goodson's term would expire March 14, 2018. Councilman Dewar has recommended the reappointment of Laurie Comshaw to the Recreation Commission. If reappointed, her term would expire September 1, 2019. For council consideration is the appointment of Bill Goodson to the Senior Commission and reappointment of Laurie Comshaw to the Recreation Commission.
Very good. Thank you, sir. Is there a motion to accept?
So moved, Mr. Mayor.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
I second.
Thank you, Councilwoman Diggs. All those in favor? And that's unanimous. Thank you. Number 2 under old business is a second reading and
Give some more.
oh,
See if
excuse
we
me,
got
thank
any.
you. Councilwoman Diggs is absolutely right. Are there any names for consideration at our next meeting?
I have 2.
Okay.
I'd like to reappoint Gary Yount for the Community Development Committee, and I'd like to reappoint Donna Moody to the Recreation Commission.
Very good. Thank you. Anyone else have any nominations today? All right. Thank you. Moving down old business number 2, this is a second reading and public hearing of an ordinance amending the code regarding drinking of beer and wine in public places. By title, an ordinance amending section 6-4 of the Aiken City Code regarding the drinking of beer or wine in public places. Is there a motion?
So moved, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, we have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Councilman Homoka. All right, comments from staff?
Mr. Mayor, since the alley renovations have been completed, this area of the downtown has become a popular spot for our community to socialize and attend various festivals and concerts and other activities. We reviewed our public consumption of beer and wine section of our city code and would like to allow permanent consumption of these beverages in the alley in B Lane. Currently, we have been authorizing the consumption through a temporary approval process, which we have been repeatedly told is an onerous process, and we have been repeatedly asked to consider reforming the process. After careful review by Public Safety, the City Attorney, and the Downtown Development Association, we have presented an amendment which will specify the following: that beer and wine can be consumed in plastic or paper cups not exceeding 16 ounces. This is for safety reasons and will ensure that no alcohol is brought into the alley and B Lane area from off-site by patrons. The geographic location is in the alley from Newbury Street to Lawrence Street, and B Lane from Park Ave to Richland Ave, which are public rights-of-way. The hours of consumption would be from 10 a.m. to 10 p.m., which coincides with the hours of our noise ordinance. This would not prevent patrons from consuming wine or beer after 10 p.m., as long as the consumption takes place inside or within the outside confines of a properly licensed establishment. Establishments may only sell one beer or wine beverage at a time to patrons taking it out into the alley in B Lane. This amendment to the City Code will not affect the special event permit process that organizations use for fundraising and other purposes. At the August 14th meeting, Councilmember Murray submitted several questions to the city staff, including our city attorney. We have attached the questions and answers to this memo within the agenda. City Council approved this ordinance on first reading at the August 14th meeting. For council consideration on second reading and public hearing is an ordinance amending section 6-4 of the Aiken City Code regarding the drinking of beer and wine in public places. And as you know, our city attorney and other staff are here that have worked on this with our local business community, and they're here to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Clem. Any comments from the audience? Comments or questions from council?
Yeah, I have several. As you know, I opposed this item at the last meeting, and I'll do so again. Councilman Murray submitted a bunch of questions, and I thought are very appropriate, and I'd like to discuss three of them. One question was, does the city have any liquor liability coverage? And the response was, the city has host liquor liability coverage. What does that mean?
Anybody that serves alcohol at any kind of an event, or if it's served on their premises, that liability coverage is there in case something happens after someone has consumed too much alcohol and a lawsuit follows.
But the liability is held by the vendor or by the city?
The vendor has their own and the city has their own.
Okay. Who
I
wants,
think you're required now, if you have a license from the state of South Carolina, they have insurance requirements as well.
who on staff would be responsible to make sure that everybody has liquor liability insurance, everybody who's selling alcohol?
It's going to be Lex. He's our risk manager.
And so he's responsible for having copies of those documents on hand?
Yes.
Okay. And the main issue I oppose it is it's just not the Aiken way to enforce it. I mean, I can't imagine that we're going to walk up to people and check whether they're over 21 or not, or whether they got their drink in the confines of the alley or not. I think this applies primarily to beer and wine. I've had folks say, well, good, as long as there's plastic cups, I'll bring my hard stuff and just walk around and enjoy myself with the rest of the folks. So, I mean, I just don't see us enforcing this ordinance. It's good in concept, but, and so that's all I'll say.
Yeah.
Will they require ID to the young people?
Remember, the beer and the wine is being served within the establishments that have the beer and wine permits.
Right.
And so they do have liability if they sell to someone who is under 8. And I think these days, most of them are, I get carded. I don't know why I get carded, okay? I think they're doing a pretty good job of carding those who look younger, that sort of, but that's the vendor's responsibility, not the city's responsibility.
I know, I worked at Oktoberfest sometime, and we always ask,
Yeah,
even if they look older,
Sure.
we always ask.
sure. That's the best practice.
The Ale House has a policy, the last time I was there in Greenville, where all their people are on camera. And if they don't see you produce a driver's license, regardless of whether you're 21 or
Right.
71, the employee gets in trouble, gets fired.
Right.
Are any other questions or comments from council? And we appreciate those answers from our youthful-looking attorney. All right, all those on second reading, please raise your hand. Councilman Homoki, the mayor, Councilwoman Diggs, and Ebner for. All those opposed? Councilman DeWatt. Very good. Moving down to number 3 under old business. This is second reading and public hearing of an ordinance to amend the city budget for fiscal year 2017-18 by title, an ordinance amending the budget of the city of Aiken for the fiscal year beginning July 1, 2017 and ending June 30th, 2018. Is there a motion?
I so move.
Thank you, Councilwoman Diggs. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Ebner. Comments from staff?
Mr. Mayor, we have attached a memorandum as part of this agenda from our Finance Director, Kim Abney, regarding unspent funds from the fiscal year 2016-17 budget. The memo lists the items recommended for the use of the unspent funds at the end of June 30, 2017. It is being recommended that the 17-18 budget be amended to include these carryover funds for these items. The attached list each item and the funding for the item. The budget adjustments are basically in 3 categories. These are include insurance claims, items on order in June that did not arrive before the end of the year, and expenses that will be spent from funds remaining at the end of June 30, 2017, requested to be held over by our departments. The City Council approved this ordinance on first reading on August 14th. for City Council consideration, the second reading and public hearing of an ordinance to amend the 17-18 budget to include unspent funds from the 16-17 budget as recommended. And as you know, our finance director is here to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Clem. Any comments from the audience? Comments from council?
I turned in a request, or I made a comment at the last meeting. I turned in a request about changing the original ordinance for the enterprise fund that specifically dedicated money to putting the meters in. We've finished the project, so what happens to the money?
Can we ask?
And that didn't, I asked for it to be on the agenda, and it didn't make it. And I guess, to me, it's a pretty straightforward issue. I'll also give you a little history. This is, in the past, when we've done this, it always just rolled into the budget and never came back to the citizens. And in this case is specific, or any enterprise fund, we raised the rates to pay for the meters.
Sure.
All right, the meters is finished, and we put in about $3 to $4 million to fix the meters over time. And so I guess it's a philosophy change in the city, because I've been up against this several times in the past. And it's, you know, so I don't know if we discuss it now or you want to put it, because to me it ought to be part of this money here, because it's within the budget.
Well, you've asked a question. Would that go to Kim, or would it?
Well, I'd just like to respond that, first of all, there is a memorandum within news updates on this item. You did request an item, and we removed it thinking that you were going to be out of town. We have every intention of putting on the next agenda. We know that you want to address that funding and what is going to happen with that, and it will be on the agenda for the next meeting.
And it's a philosophy change in the city. So we've gone through the budget that's cleaned up a whole lot of the pigeonholes that money was in. And this is one of the last ones, and it basically has to do with an enterprise fund. And we have 4 of them, I think, now, including that includes the airport. So I would still like it to be on the agenda. Should it be part of this item, or is it different than the item we're voting on now?
It doesn't have to be part of this. We had every intention of wanting to have this conversation with you present, since you were the one that brought up the issue. And it's a substantive issue that we need to address. And so it will be on the agenda for the next meeting. We just wanted you to be able to participate in that discussion.
If we need to go back and revise this, we can.
That's right.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
You okay with that, Gary?
You can amend the budget with more than one budget amendment ordinance.
All right, I'm good with that. Thank you.
And we'll direct staff to put that on the next agenda. Thank you, Councilman.
Appreciate it.
Good issue. Any other comments? All those in favor of second reading? And that's unanimous. Thank you. Moving down to new business on the agenda. Number 1 is the first reading of an ordinance to annex 4105 Trolley Line Road, owned by Caitlin Shearer. By title, an ordinance to annex property owned by Caitlin Shearer and to zone the same residential single-family RS-10. Is there a motion?
So moved, Mr. Mayor.
A motion and a second. Thank you. Comments from staff?
Mr. Mayor, you have 3 annexation requests, and because of the aggressive nature of this council in directing staff, we will be seeing many, many more of these. And so this is in accordance with the actions of this council. And as I said, they'll be. I have had several conversations with some councilors about whether these items should be on some type of consent agenda or whatever. There isn't an expectation that people need to show up and testify on these items, but your action is required on them.
Yeah,
If council desires, we could actually have one ordinance to address each of these individual petitions. If they're all for the same reason, if they're all coming to appear as new water customers, new sewer customers, we could put all of those together as one ordinance for consideration by city council if you wanted to do that.
that would be okay. And my assumption is going forward, we'll follow the ordinances that we passed in the past.
Yes, sir.
Well, I had raised the issue of whether they really, let me again make sure I understand why they're doing it. Is this the policy that we passed that said if you sell the house and your contiguous, you've got an annex, okay.
Yes.
The question I raise is, why are we burdening the planning commission with these when there's really nothing for the planning commission to do but to say yes? Why don't they come directly to council for the 2 readings?
You've got two things going. The main thing that you've got going on is the property has to be zoned. And planning commission has to pass on zoning. City council can't do zoning without the planning commission making the review. That's the main reason why it has to go to the planning commission.
Okay, all right, that makes sense.
Planning Commission could handle it the same way.
Yes, sir. They can do one,
And I'd be all for
one
that.
recommendation to city council and annex all of them.
Are there any comments from the audience on this issue before we go any further?
Okay.
Any other comments from council?
No, I'd support the one ordinance,
Yeah,
obviously.
I would too, I agree.
That's definitely.
All right, all those in favor of first reading on number 1? And that's unanimous, thank you. Number 2 is a first reading of an ordinance to annex property on Oakland Hill Street owned by Chris and Carol Vereen's. By title, an ordinance to annex property owned by Chris and Carol Vereen's and to zone the same residential single-family RS-15. Is there a motion?
I so move.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any comments from the audience? Comments from council? All those in favor? That's unanimous. I think as our ordinance starts to move further, I think we can see that there will probably be a need to consolidate these into one motion. Number 3 is, and that passes unanimous. Number 3 is a first reading of an ordinance to annex property at 2114 Casaba Drive owned by Francisco Terrell and Jody Poole-Terrell. By title, an ordinance to annex property owned by Francisco Terrell and Jody Poole-Terrell and to zone the same residential single-family RS-15. Is there a motion?
I so move.
A motion, is there a second?
Second?
And a second, thank you. Anyone here in the audience to speak on this? Okay, any comments from council?
Just one comment. I want to thank Ryan Bland, our planning director, and Stuart Wiedenville, our assistant city manager, for their support of this program. It's a very vital program. We've got a lot of lots that we need to deal with. I think the move on the part of council last year was a good move to spur annexation. And I expect that we are going to continue to work this issue in greater depth. I appreciate the work on both.
Thank you. I agree, Councilman Dwyer. We appreciate that. All right, all those in favor? And that's unanimous. Thank you. Moving down to petitions and requests. Number 1 is approval of a resolution for contract with South Carolina Department of Transportation for snow and ice removal. By title, a resolution authorizing the City of Aiken to enter into a contract with the South Carolina Department of Transportation for snow and ice removal. Is there a motion?
I so move.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second?
Sir, brief comments from staff.
Mr. Mayor, the South Carolina Department of Transportation would like us to enter into a snow and ice removal agreement with the City of Aiken. The agreement would go into effect when emergency conditions occur and the governor's declared a state of emergency. The agreement would be for the purpose of leasing or renting heavy-duty motor graders with qualified operators, pertinent equipment, and support personnel when needed, and if the city availability allows. They would like to have the agreement in place to better prepare for emergency situations. This type of request would typically come if another part of the state is impacted by winter weather. We benefited from similar mutual aid during winter storm packs as crews and equipment from Greenville, Lexington, and Springdale came to assist us. Any use of our equipment and staff would be reimbursed using FEMA rates in effect at the time of the declared state of emergency. For council consideration is an agreement with the South Carolina Department of Transportation for snow and ice removal and use of equipment if available in emergency situations.
Thank you, Mr. Clem. Any comments from the audience? Any comments or questions from council?
Yes. What about a hurricane or other windstorms and stuff? There's stuff on the roads today, which is luckily is very little, and we tend to take care of the small stuff. Is there a different agreement needs to be made for windstorm? I guess that would cover hurricanes or tornadoes or whatever.
My understanding is that there is an existing agreement for for hurricanes and for the type of weather that we're witnessing right now. But annually, there's a snow and ice removal.
Okay, so this one is annual, but the other one is
That's right.
in
It's ongoing.
perpetuity?
Yes.
It's odd, but okay.
Yeah, the title of it
sounds
sounds
odd.
odd to me, quite frankly. Snow and ice, I mean, I know we have had snow, and we've had ice.
I haven't seen it.
Hang on.
I was just curious why this had to be an annual thing versus windstorm is forever.
I believe that there's a provision in state law in South Carolina that requires an annual approval for multi-jurisdictional approval.
Thank you.
All right, all those in favor? And that's unanimous, thank you. Moving down, petitions and requests to number 2 is the approval of a resolution to provide match for Municipal Association of South Carolina Hometown Economic Development Grant. By title, a resolution committing the City of Aiken to providing a local match for Municipal Association of South Carolina Hometown Economic Development Grant. Is there a motion?
So moved, Mr. Mayor.
I second.
We have a motion and a second. Brief comments from staff?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, we need your approval to actually apply for this funding that is in, I believe, in the second year through the Municipal Association for Economic Development Grants. This proposal that was drafted by staff under the leadership of Tim O'Brien would provide for grant matches for private sector businesses along Richland Ave for improvements to their property. So it would be to encourage improvements to private sector properties along a designated route on Richland Ave as one of our first steps in addressing the issue that this council has been very clear that it wanted to tackle, which is improving the overall appearance of the Richland Ave corridor. So this is a request from staff to apply for a $25,000 grant, and it would be used to match private sector initiatives on their own property to try to encourage business folks to improve their property.
Very good. Any comments from the audience? Okay. Comments from council?
Just thanking Tim for leading the way, making the request. Can't wait to see the end result.
All right. All those in favor? And that's unanimous. Thank you. Number 3 under petitions and requests, this is a approval of resolution to allow reimbursement from the bond issue for water and sewer system improvements for expenses incurred prior to the bond issue. By title, a resolution to express the intention of the City Council of the City of Aiken to cause the City of Aiken to be reimbursed with the proceeds of tax-exempt obligations for certain costs associated with improvements to its water and sewer system. Is there a motion?
So moved, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Ebner. Second.
I second.
Councilwoman Diggs. I'll recommend,
Are we going to contact?
if
We
necessary.
can if it's necessary.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we have our attorney, Gary Pope, who's working with us on issues of borrowing, available to answer any questions by phone. He's in Columbia and was unable to be with us, but if the council has specific legal questions, either our attorney or Attorney Pope are available to answer any of your concerns. But prior to the issuance of bonds for water and sewer system improvements, there are some expenses for preparation of the project and for preparing for the issuance of the bond. Our attorney, Gary Pope, has prepared a resolution for City Council's consideration, which would allow the city to be reimbursed for the bond issue for any money spent on the project before the issuance of bonds for the water and sewer system improvements project. The resolution does not approve any issue of bonds, but if bonds are issued, would allow the city to be reimbursed for costs incurred for the prior project prior to the bond issuance. And this initial one is for water and sewer, and the second one is for stormwater. So for City Council's consideration is approval of a resolution to allow the city to be reimbursed for expenses spent prior to the issuance of bond for improvements to the water and sewer system. And I know from my activities in 2 other states, it is common practice to include the costs of preparing for a bond issuance into the overall cost of the project through the funding of a bond.
Thank you, Mr. Clem. Any comments from the audience? Okay. Comments from staff?
I got a
Counselor?
quick question here.
Yes, sir.
Are we basically,
Councilman
is the city basically making a loan to the enterprise fund? And then when the enterprise fund catches up with the bond issue and all the other collections,
Kim
do
Abney.
they pay the city back?
I'm going to ask Kim Abney to come up and address that for us. Good evening, Kim.
I have been talking to Gary Pope about this, and I can answer maybe like 2 questions. That's one of them. We're not going to do a loan to ourselves, like borrow from the general fund, but this is if we're spending money now and from now forward to reimburse for the bonds. So part of it would be like attorney's fees, some of the engineering work that they're going to do before they actually put shovels in the ground. In order for us to maintain our tax exempt status, this is to comply with federal tax code. So that was one of the main reasons to do it, is we have to be able to tell the IRS, yes, we complied with the reimbursement resolution. And it's really, as John Clem stated, it's a housekeeping for bond counsel to check off that says, yes, we have approved this. Because there will be costs before we actually issue the bonds, which we're anticipating to be in November. Okay. That would be the
But I
first
think the
one.
gentleman's question was, is the funding that needs to be reimbursed coming from the enterprise fund or from the enterprise?
We're not going to do any loans, so it's going to be, if we have to write a check for something, it'll be out of the utilities fund or stormwater, and then we would reimburse that fund with the bond proceeds. But we're not going to borrow between funds.
Okay.
I just have a question.
Yes.
If we issue bonds, are these bonds that City of Aiken residents could buy?
I'm sorry,
Go to a bond, if we have a bond issue that,
You ain't never gonna see that.
for water or sewer, are these bonds that City of Aiken residents could buy if they wanted to?
could buy. I don't know that answer. I'm sorry, I don't know that
I
answer.
haven't had that answer from you in a long time.
One of the 2 questions, Dick.
I know. I had 2.
Actually, the answer to the question is it depends on how we actually go through the process of borrowing. If we're going through a bank, if we're going through a state agency, then obviously the answer is no. If we go out on the market, then the answer is yes.
Okay.
That hasn't been determined yet.
Okay, thank you.
And that'll come when our financial folks advise us in terms of the most appropriate course of action, then we'll be able to answer that question.
Okay.
But it's a little premature.
Okay. I have a little technicality on the resolution. Item A says financing of the portion of the cost of acquisition, construction, and equipment. And in the write-up from Mr. Clement says preparation of the project. And we don't want to start construction without the bonds issued.
Right.
Because if something goes wrong, then you're sitting out there with an obligation to pay $4.5 million that we don't have.
Well, you're not going to construct until you pass the bond.
But this reads over here, it says, for the financing, the portion of the cost of acquisition, construction, and equipping of the project to be funded with the obligations.
But this doesn't say you're going to have the obligations.
That's
So
right.
you wouldn't do anything until you had the obligation. They're not going to be reimbursing, no expenses are going to be incurred unless the bond is approved.
So we don't, I thought
This
this was,
this doesn't approve the bond.
I understand, we did that already.
This just sets the stage to make sure that you're on board with the tax people, like
Okay.
Kim said.
So if John, I'll use John Poole because I know he's working with it. So if John goes out and hires the design person to lay out a plan for this, he can go ahead and do that, and then we get reimbursed for it.
I think that's the plan, correct?
That is.
But the way I read a resolution item, we could actually start construction, and we really don't want to do that without the bond being passed.
Well, you're not going to start construction until council approves the construction, correct?
Yes.
That's still got to come before
Okay,
council.
I'll be glad that it would come back to the future council members, but I thought we'd already passed that, but I always like it, my own personal opinion is to come back to council once you get the contract.
That's right.
Even though we've authorized the money, it should come to council and say the contract is within the scope. Okay, thank you.
They
And
haven't
I have the
authorized
same
the
question
bond,
on the second one.
Right. I'm sorry.
Council hasn't authorized the bond issue yet. That'll come up.
Right.
Just want to be sure.
I appreciate that. Thank you, Councilman.
Stranger things have happened.
All right, all those in favor? And that's unanimous. Number 4 under petitions and requests is approval of resolution to allow reimbursements from the bond issue for stormwater system improvements in the downtown for expenses incurred prior to the bond issue. By title, a resolution to express the intention of the City Council to the City of Aiken to cause the City of Aiken to be reimbursed with the proceeds of tax-exempt obligations for certain costs associated with improvements to its stormwater system in the downtown and adjacent areas. Is there a motion?
So move.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second?
Thank you. It's the same as the one above from staff.
For stormwater.
Yeah, this is stormwater. Is there any comments from the audience? Comments from council? All those in favor? Thank you, and that's unanimous. Number 5 under petitions and requests, this is a request for approval to spend capital project sales tax funds for utility work in the downtown area. Is there a motion?
So move.
Thank you, Councilman Ebner. Is there a second? Thank you, Councilwoman Diggs. Comments from staff?
Mr. Mayor, at the April 24th council meeting, the council approved staff moving forward with engineering design work and request for bids for Phase 1A of the Newbury Street Water and Stormwater Utility Infrastructure Improvement Project within the Downtown Redevelopment Project area. Phase 1A of the project consists of water and stormwater utility improvements along the southbound lane of Newbury Street from Park Ave to the alley. Phase 1 of the project is to be completed in advance of any work in the revitalization effort. Our engineering staff and consultant project team have completed the design for Phase 1A for water and stormwater improvements. On August 23rd, bids were opened for the project. The low bid submitted was that of TriStar Contractors of Edgefield, South Carolina, and the amount of $368,950, including 15% engineering and contingencies. Our engineering staff has also received a proposal from JLA for professional services for construction oversight and resident project representative services through completion of the project for a maximum fee of $31,050, including engineering and contingencies. Engineering staff is recommending that the bid of TriStar Contractors and the professional service fee of JLA for construction oversight be approved using capital project sales tax 2 and 3, totaling $400,000. For council consideration is approval of the bid of TriStar Contractors and JLA for professional services not to exceed $400,000 for Phase 1A of the Newbury Street Water and Stormwater Utility Infrastructure Improvement Project with funding from the capital project sales tax funds. The funds would come from the water utility improvements account and the amount of $225,000 in stormwater utility improvement account and the amount of $175,000. And Mr. Mayor, our Public Works Director, is here to answer any questions about this project that you may have.
All right. Thank you, sir. Are there any comments from the audience? Any comments or questions from council?
Yeah, I have a couple of comments. It's not material to the issue, but I'm disturbed to see so many references to the downtown project and Renaissance for this issue. It has nothing to do with it. When we approved this, we approved this small segment from the alley to Park to obtain 2 pieces of information. How long is it going to take us, and how much is it going to cost? And to see staff involved with tying this into the schedule for the Renaissance or the downtown redevelopment area I mean, they're coincidental, so that's why I say it's not a material comment, but we really need to focus on the infrastructure project, because we're going to do this whether we do the downtown development or not. We haven't talked to the downtown development or Renaissance to the point of even having any idea about a schedule. And I see a comment in here about tearing down the Brinkley building. I don't even know what the Brinkley building is. I would assume the only building we own is the one that public safety used. Is that what we mean by the Brinkley building?
That is what's being meant. The only reference there was at the insistence of this council that no work go forward downtown without this being done. You're right, there's no nexus between the two, other than the fact that this council mandated that this work be done. So whether the downtown revitalization on any property ever happens, this work is going to get done. And that reference by a public works director was in reference to the insistence of this council that the infrastructure get done first.
Yes.
It does not mean that you cannot conclude anything other about that, other than the fact that the infrastructure is going to get done.
We agree.
Yeah.
Without regard to whether we have a
Correct.
Renaissance or not. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Water. Yes, sir, Mr. Edmond.
I brought the April agenda item, and I would compliment Michelle and John Poole and the others work with her. According to the schedule that we approved then, we should be finished prior to the date that we projected back in April, so I think we're on the right path. The other comment I'll make, the supervision, I'll use the word supervision. It's not really an engineer of record, but it's close to it. I think the format that we have here, this is the first one that I'm aware of the city has used to manage projects. Everything else has been internal, and they don't usually turn out as best they should. So this is the quotation that he gave and those 11 items on there. So if we do those 11 items, we'll have a good project and the roads won't cave in. So I compliment John following through on what he told us he would do.
All right, all those in favor of item 5 under petitions and requests? And that's unanimous. Thank you. Moving down to items of information, I'd like to recognize our city manager, John Clem. First of all, if you could give us a little bit of an update of the hurricane and everything that's been happening.
Ongoing as we speak. I just wanted to take a moment, Mr. Mayor, to recognize and thank the men and women of our various departments that have been working for many weeks, but very particularly over the past weekend and into this week, preparing for and dealing with this hurricane, whether it's our staff at Public Safety, Public Works staff as we speak are out there cutting up trees that have fallen. Over 60 trees now have fallen in the city, and our men and women of our department are out there. It's wet, it's rainy, it's slippery, it's dangerous, and I think we owe a debt of gratitude for the men and women of those departments that are out there working for us, as well as our staff in Park and Rec and all of the other departments or whatever. So we're targeting the reality that we have many trees that are down, and that is our focus presently. We know that many residents are without power. Countywide, I think I've seen the number of almost 20,000 residents countywide have lost power. And so we're dealing with those issues as well. I want to thank the men and women of SE&G and Aiken Co-op. They're out there, all hours of the night restoring power, and we want to recognize and thank them as well. And so I also want to just briefly mention, since it was mentioned in the news updates, that we are embarking on a brand new and a very aggressive approach to grants funding. And this council has expressed frustration, to be quite frank, from time to time, that we all too often haven't been aggressive enough in the area of grants. I just want to hand out for you to review, and I need to get them back from you afterwards, But this is a publication that we just received from an entity that we're working with in Washington, D.C. But they came to Aiken and spent several days with us 2 weeks ago and met with every single department head and asked them to identify present priorities and projected future priorities. They have returned to Washington, D.C., and they've just provided us this document. There are over 100 grant opportunities that are available at this time that directly relate to the priorities that this council has set and that have been articulated by our department heads, our department managers. And so starting as early as tomorrow morning at our staff meeting, we're going to be reviewing this document. And this is a whole new era for the city of Aiken. We're going to become very aggressive. There's an old saying is you can't receive a grant if you haven't applied for it. And there's several aspects of that. The first is that you have to have knowledge that the grant opportunities are available. And all too often in city government, we can get bogged down in our day-to-day life and not have the time to spend to look at these opportunities. But with resources as tight as they are, we can no longer afford not to be aggressive in this approach. I know I'm preaching to the choir because I've talked to every member of this council and you've told me how strongly you feel about this. But we have some real pros in the firm that we are working with. You're going to see a new and I think exciting commitment by our staff to understand that we need to be more aggressive. The first aspect of this is identifying what resources are out there. The second, which is just as important, is having the wherewithal to write an effective grant. And we're dealing with that issue as well. We all have so many things on our plate. All too often we'll say, well, I don't have the time to do that and whatever. And so I'm working very closely with our senior managers to figure out what additional resources we need, additional expertise. The city of Aiken is going to start playing the grants game. We're going to get aggressive over the next 6 months to a year. I think this council will be pleased at the commitment of our staff to comprehensively address the issue of alternative funding. We all know that we can't continue to raise fees. Our options are limited, and we owe it to our taxpayers. They're paying, for the most part, other than foundation opportunities, which are real as well. They're paying through their state taxes and their federal taxes for these programs. And they lose out if we're not aggressive enough by writing these grants. And so we will be doing that. We will be regularly updating you, and I think that you'll be pleased at our efforts over the next 6 months to a year.
Would that require us to employ a special grant writer?
It might. When we identify the grant program, we will be making an assessment as to, on a case-by-case basis. There are several people that are residents in Aiken that are kind of semi-retired, that are very good writers, that we might be employing, but we're going to be making that decision on a case-by-case basis. We'll identify the opportunity and then determine whether it can be best handled in-house or out of house, and we might have to come to the council for some resources in that regard as well. But I wanted to thank the members of the council. I've had many individual discussions, and I wanted to thank you for your leadership in this. I know that you're supportive of us doing that, and we will do everything in our power over the next 6 months to a year to make you pleased that we headed in this new direction.
Very good. Any other?
Yeah, I'd like to make an additional comment if I could. The public may not be aware, but we get a memo called Issues and Updates in our packet before every meeting. And part of that is a list of commercial projects that are being done in the city. Some are simply under construction, some are review of the plans, and some are certificate of occupancy. These are investments in the business community by the business. This particular issue I'm holding in my hand reflects 15 projects, 3 of which are brand new. So I think we have a new tire place, we have a Panda Express coming, and I think there was a doctor's office in here. So business is reinvesting in the city of Aiken, and I think it's important for everybody to understand that. I think some folks have a perception that we're behind the 8 ball. We're not. And this is the kind of data that's available to this particular document at every council meeting. At one point last year, we determined that the businesses had invested $28 million, and that didn't account Chipotle or Starbucks. So we are actively and aggressively promoting business development in the city of Aiken, and I think everybody needs to know that.
Thank you, Councilman DeVore.
For the next meeting, we need a critical update on the election status. There was a deadline on September 8th, and I didn't see any memo, and I've been gone for a week, but I read my email. The last day for certifying candidates for the Municipal Election Commission, which is for the election day on November 7th. And we are part of that this election cycle. And I think we need to get an update, be sure we have 2 names to put on that ballot on November 7th, if I'm not mistaken, right? There's a Democrat and Republican running for 1 seat. And so we need.
Those are party responsibilities at this point.
No, not for I thought the general election day was a different thing. That's not for the party.
We'll get an update.
Well, that's a good question to ask. What are we doing for November 7th?
We'll have an update on our next.
Yeah, and see if we made the September 8th.
Okay.
Harking
Councilman
back to
Logan.
the grant writing, we've got committees and commissions. I think somehow or another, we should locate about those 3 or 4 talented people that have experience writing grants, and then make it formalized with the city creating a commission or a committee. We've got committees for recreation, and this is probably just as important, if not more so, trying to get some funds.
Very good. I would just like to point out that we have in attendance tonight Councilman-elect Mr. Ed Giardo's with us. Appreciate you being here. And that's right. And Councilwoman-elect Andrea Gregory. So welcome to the chambers, guys. All right, is there a motion to adjourn?
I so moved.
All those in favor, please stand up. That's a good idea.
Yeah, you should. Wait now. Do you want to look at it?
No.